Hi everyone, welcome back. This is our next lesson on Macbeth. This one is focusing on Macbeth as a metaphor for evil. So our question is going to be, how does Shakespeare depict evil in Macbeth? And your first question is, what character is most evil and which character is most good in Macbeth? I'd like to explain why. So make sure you pause the video here, and whilst you paused it, start writing your answers in your book. When you finish writing your answers in your book, you can unpause it and see how you got on. So that's your starter question. Pause the video, answer in your book, then come back to the video. Good. Right. So some of the most evil characters you might talk about might be Macbeth, might be Lady Macbeth, might be the witches. Obviously the most good you could infer is Duncan. By the way that he is described as almost being like his death is like a breach in nature. He is a holy and a good king. He is respected by everybody. Even his blood is described as golden. So Duncan is obviously one of the most good characters. That would probably be, and I'd imagine if you put that, you would have explained why, because if this play was meant to really promote the idea of kings being close to God, doing so would be a good way to get into the good books of the new king, King James I. Hopefully you can add some quotes to your justification as well that can link back to the concept of evil. One of them that is always a good one to think about is the reference to serpents, because that would link back to the biblical concept of the Garden of Eden. So you might be able to suggest that is a connection with evil. Okay, once you finish that starter now, then we're going to move on. And I'm going to ask you to recap our contextual knowledge. So there are three ways in which people perceive to be evil. So to blaspheme, which is to go against the idea of God. To be a masculine woman, so to break the idea of being a typically Jacobean woman. Or to betray the king. So the three key ways in which characters might have behaved in a way that is evil. Now it's up to you to make sure you duplicate what is on the screen here in your books and fill in the gaps, because then that shows me you can actually come up with answers for yourselves and understand the context a little better. So you can now, when you've paused this video, make sure you duplicate those phrases in your book and fill in the gaps. Right, so you probably want some answers then. So under the great chain of being, that was a Christian hierarchy, so I like that pyramid we've drawn that explained their world, and God would be at the top. They believed in the divine right of kings, the idea that the God at the top would, where's my hand gone? There you go. God at the top would define the kings, and the kings would define the lords, and the lords would define the nobles, and so on and so on, so on down to the rocks and the stones. And to subvert or upset this order we see as blasphemy. So we've already seen that Macbeth has upset this order by killing the king. So that tells us he is evil, arguably. In the middle you have the Jacobean woman, and women in the 17th century were supposed to be, what do we think? Obedient to their fathers. They were supposed to be pious or religious. They are supposed to be faithful to their husbands. So three key things there. And lastly, they're also meant to be pacifists, meaning they were very peaceful and did not participate in war or conflict, which is quite the opposite to what we've seen with Lady Macbeth, how she is very eager to put the knives back on the grooms and to encourage the murder of King Duncan. So she's actively participating in a conflict there between Macbeth and Duncan. And lastly, King James I, who would have been king at the time when Macbeth was first put on. So he believed in witchcraft. He really thoroughly believed the witches were real and they were consorting with the devil. Shakespeare would have written parts of the play to impress the new monarch. We all understand that now. But he was Scottish and had reigned there before being named King of the United Kingdom. So he had actively participated in the witch trials in Scotland and brought that belief to the whole nation. Okay, next, I want you to read this extract from Act 1, Scene 3 between the witches and examine the concept of evil in this scene. So perhaps figuring out what kind of evil that would be. Now I've added the definition now just to make sure we understand how the dictionary definition defines the concept of evil. So the idea of immoral as much as wicked, rather than just doing something bad. And it's sometimes also considered around the idea of supernatural. So evil is perceived to be something not human, but something that goes beyond humanity and into something more mysterious. So read this extract and then we're going to come back to this. So take a second to read that and then come back to the video. Okay, so now you've read that, what I'm going to ask you to do is explain how the witch is evil. What have they done that shows they're evil? What techniques suggest that? So what in this quotation, in this extract rather, tells us that they are evil? Have a look at some of the different literary techniques you might have looked at before. So we've looked at a variety of different things in terms of how people would speak within a play. We've looked at the kind of figurative language they might use. So find a technique, and what I want you to do is this little bubble map, I want you to create that yourself. So you can write the word evil, how the witch is evil, and what technique suggests this, all in your book. Right, once you've done that, we're then going to move on to the next bit. Okay, so you haven't got an extract to rely on now. How are the Macbeths evil? What have they done that is immoral, wicked, or even perhaps supernatural? You might be able to think of some good quotes that would support that. So we mentioned serpents. We also might remember the phrases that Lady Macbeth uses around spirits. So write that down now in addition to that bubble map. How are the Macbeths evil? Add that to your bubble map on the bottom of your book. So now add a technique. Is there a particular technique here? Is something being said or done or created by Shakespeare to reinforce the idea that the Macbeths are evil? And the last thing, how are they different? So how are the witch's version of evil different from the Macbeth's version of evil? What is it that separates them? Is there anything that separates them? If there are similarities, you might want to consider those as well. So your bubble chart should have answers to these questions on, laid out like that, nicely in your book. Okay? That's the end of today's lesson. I want us to make sure you've got that in your book, so please make sure you upload a photograph of that onto Google Classrooms. I want to give a quick shout out for a few students who've actually done all the work already. So well done to those of you who submitted your independent study online, to Alistair, Kaya, Toby C, Jacob, Harry, Tia, Naya, Rebecca, Jessica, Francesca, Umar, Toby B and Amelie. Well done to all of you who have done that before lunchtime today on Tuesday the 24th. So that's really good. You've all done that already. I'm sure the rest of you will be doing that over the next day or two. So see you again next time. That's been the end of lesson 32.